Hello, gardeners. I'm John Bowen, a Buncombe County Extension Master Gardener and a longtime seed planter. Today, we're going to talk about starting seeds and growing transplants indoors. This is a presentation for the Black Martin Sowing Circle and the Black Mountain Blooms Seed Lending Library. We've recorded it in 3 parts. This is part 1, which I'll talk about the advantages of starting seed and the materials that you're going to need to get growing. In part 2, I'll discuss lights and temperature, and in part 3, I'll cover timing, when to start your seeds, the planting process, and give you some tips and tricks to speed you on your way. So let's get started. Good morning, gardeners. Are you ready to get those seed packets out and start digging in the dirt? Well, before you do, before you get too carried away, I need to give you a cautionary note. This is me. A couple of years ago, wasn't too long ago, I was just learning to plant seeds, and it has spread. It's a warning. If you get involved in this seed planting thing, if you get carried away, this is what it can lead to. This is part of what my basement looks like right now. Plants everywhere. So, a cautionary note. This is a disclaimer. If you become a seed starting maniac, master gardeners are in no way responsible for that happening. And this is another disclaimer. The brand names and the pictures of the products that are going to be appearing in this presentation are for product identification or educational purposes only. No endorsement is intended, nor is criticism implied of similar products that are not mentioned. Lawyers, take a deep breath now, because we're going to start talking about starting seeds indoors. We're going to be talking about this in 3 parts today. Part 1 is going to cover the goals and the advantages of starting seeds and the physical materials you need. In part 2, we're going to talk about the light and the temperature requirements. Then in part 3, we'll move on to the timing, the actual planting, and talk about some stratification, some scarification, some tips and tricks that might help you out. We'll pause between the parts and you'll get a chance to catch your breath. So what are the goals and the advantages of planting your own seeds and growing your own transplants? Well, you're all gardeners here. You've all done this before. You're just here to learn a few extra little things. So I feel like I'm talking to the choir. Nevertheless, even though a lot of you are experts already, you're just going to have to humor me because I'm going to do this. So let me ask you, what are some of the goals and advantages of starting your own transplants? Shout it out, and through the miracle of Zoom, I'm going to hear you all talking. Okay, I heard somebody say it's a good way to produce vigorous plants. Somebody else said, I'm going to save money long term because I'm not going to be going out every spring and buying plants and buying plants and buying plants. Some of you said, I'm going to plant the varieties I choose because often the nurseries or the big stores don't have the tomato I want. They don't have the pepper I want. I get to pick. They're going to be available when I need them. I'm not going to have to go to the nursery and find that they've sold out my variety. When I'm ready to transplant, I will have plants. And I'm going to make the best use of my seed. If you're buying seed instead of getting it from the seed exchange library, it's gotten expensive. And if half or 2/3 of your seed doesn't make it out in the field, you're wasting a lot of money. Planting them indoors yourself, every seed has a chance to come up and do its thing. Of course, you're going to be germinating under ideal conditions. You're going to be controlling the temperature, the moisture, the light. You're going to have a good planting media. You're going to plant at the right depth. You're not going to have to deal with rain coming down and crusting over our clay soils. So there are a lot of reasons to do this. What do we need to make it happen? Well, let's go over the physical apparatus you might want to use. First thing is containers. And in the picture here, you can see the picture of what the industry calls a 10-20 tray, the plastic nursery standard tray. They come with holes, without holes. It just depends on how you're going to use it. I have a bunch of both kinds. So do you know why it's called a 10-20 tray? And the answer is pretty simple. A lot of you know. It's 10 inches wide, it's 20 inches long. How can you beat that? What you see in this particular tray is the 36 cell insert arrangement. It's what we commonly call 6-packs. These are the things that you often find in the nurseries. They're about 1.5 inches square. They're a really good size for doing transplants, and I do hundreds of them this way. You also see that plastic cover up there, that humidity cover. That's a really great way to get the seed started, and it's transparent, so it lets in good light. What if you have an aversion to plastic? What if you don't like that option? There's some other choices. You can get peat or coconut coir pots. They come in pretty much the same shape. Many people like these. And one of the reasons they like them is because they can take the whole pot and plant it out in the garden without disturbing the roots, the peat or the coconut coir will break down over time, and it makes a very simple process. On the other hand, many gardeners don't like them because that peat sucks up a lot of moisture, and if you don't get the top below the soil level, if you plant that pot with the top sticking up a little bit, it can act like a wick. It can pull the moisture right out and make a dry barrier that your roots don't want to penetrate. The other downside for many of us is that roots don't like to penetrate that dense material. They might grow out to the peat and stop. So what a lot of us do who use the peat pots, still peel them off, take them out of the way. We still transplant the plants out of the pot. We peel the peat shell off, throw the peat in the compost, and just plant the plants like usual. So try them out if you wish, but consider what your roots are doing and whether they're really working well in your garden. Many people get creative and find pots out of household items. There you see some toilet paper tubes. You could also use paper towel tubes that have been cut off. Those work okay because the bottoms are open, so the roots can grow down into the soil. The roots are not going to want to penetrate that paper side. It takes a long time for that to break down, and that can be a root inhibitor. So think carefully about that. The yogurt cartons up there in the upper right work great. Just be sure to poke some holes in the bottom. You want good drainage. I have seen people use eggshells as plant starting pots. This seems a little odd to me, but let's talk about it for a moment. The eggshells are small. You're going to have to move those up to something larger. There's just not enough room for roots there. And once again, the roots are not going to penetrate those eggshells, so you're going to need to crack that shell or break the bottom off or something. It's a cute idea, but think about whether it practically fits where you need to go. One other pot arrangement is newspaper pots. They look flimsy. You say, oh my gosh, that's not going to last. It will last until you get them in the soil. You can make them with newspapers, wrap them up. The bottoms aren't open, but the papers are thin and the roots will get through them okay. If you go onto YouTube, you will find about 650 videos, all describing the very best way in the world to make newspaper pots. And I bet that you can find one that will suit you. What if you want to get away from the pots completely? A couple of options here. You can use the peat or coconut coir pellets. Jiffy is a name brand, often listed as a Jiffy 7. They're a compressed peat product, and when you put them in water, they swell up and get to the size of the two that are shown there on the bottom. You see the green plants growing in one. These are nice because you can pick them up, put them right in the garden. There's no root disturbance. You're not going to have to peel anything off. They also let the roots do what we call air pruning. When the little root tips hit the edge of that pot, the root tips die, and that's okay because internally it makes a very bushy, fibrous root system that gets your plants off to a great start. Many growers use them. I have used them in the past. They work very well. You might notice that there's this gray coating around them. There's a very thin plastic mesh that coats that peat pellet. When you put that in the garden, after the plants go away, next year, you're going to find little plastic mesh skeletons all over your garden. Many people don't like that. I have used them. It hasn't been a big problem, but you are introducing that foreign matter into your soil. I believe that you can also get some that don't have the plastic mesh. I have not used those. One last possibility for you, if you want to stay away from the pots, is to go to soil blocks. I'm going to try that this year for the first time in my life. You see in the picture on the left there, that silver soil block making machine. You have to have a device to make these to squeeze them out really hard. But the advantage is no plastic. You can pick them up, transplant them directly in the garden, just like the Jiffy pellets. You get the advantage of the air layering. You can control the media. You can make your own mix. You can buy mixes. Some large-scale growers use these extensively and have very good results. They're a little bit of an art. It's not something that doesn't take some practice to get that block just right. But once you get it, it can be an effective way to avoid the pots and avoid the root disturbance. I'm going to try them this year, and next year I will report back to you on my own experience with them. So you have some container choices. You can go with the plastic pots, you can go with the peat pots, you can make things out of newspapers, you can go potless with the Jiffy pellets, you can go with the soil blocks, a lot of choices. That's totally up to you, and I think that you will make a good one for your particular situation. So assuming you're going to use some sort of a pot, what goes in it? Growing medium. The characteristic you want is that it has to be loose, it has to be well drained, It has to be fine textured because you want it to make really good contact with those seeds. It needs to be free of insects and diseases and weed seeds. It's nothing more frustrating than planting your little seeds in the pots, having them come up, and all of a sudden in a jungle of weeds in there. Generally, your growing media is going to be soilless. It's going to be what's called a blended mixture. Peat moss and coconut coir are the base materials. You might have vermiculite, you might have perlite, you might have both. You might have a pH balancer, you might have a detergent to make it wettable. It may or may not have fertilizer, and you need to pay attention to that. We'll talk more about the fertilizer issue in a couple of minutes here. Some growing media that work very well are Pro Mix, Sunshine Mix. Sunshine makes a great propagation mix, and this is the one that Lindell has available for you at the library. It's an excellent choice. Fox Farm makes a good product. Some people like Miracle Grow. There are other mixes that are available locally. You can buy them by the bag, you can buy them by the bale. Just read the label and make sure that you know what's in the mix before you get started. And the labeling is just totally confusing because there's no industry standard on what anything means. You can find seed starting mix, you can find propagation mix, you can find potting medium. So let me try to clarify that just a little bit about what you're looking for. Seed starting mixes need to be fine textured. Potting media is usually coarser. They're concerned about long-term drainage. They often have bark in them, and bark is great in potting media. Not so good in seed mix because it's a little bit coarse for good seed contact. They need to be light and well draining so you don't drown your seeds or have them suffocate. Where potting media that's used for long-term pots can be denser because the plants are just more robust. Usually, seed starting mix will have no fertilizer, or it will have a little bit of organic material in there, some worm castings, some compost, some bat guano. The Sunshine Mix that Lindell has for you has no fertilizer, and that's fine. Potting media, on the other hand, often does have fertilizer. It may have a time release, it may have organic, it may have chemical. Read the label and see what's there. And most importantly, seed starting mix should not have water retention crystals. Potting media may have water retention crystals. It says it evens out the watering schedule, it saves your plant from drying. Those water retention crystals hold too much water and they can rot your seeds, so stay away from those for your seed starting mix. In any case, the one thing we suggest that you not use is garden soil. It's not sterile, full of weeds, full of disease organisms. It may not drain very well. And some potting soil you'll find when you read the label is soil-based as opposed to peat or coir-based. So check it out, read the ingredients, just be careful. Well, gardeners, we're making progress. We have containers or some possibilities on containers. We have some thoughts on a good media to use for planting these guys. Now we have one more piece of the basic material there. We need seeds. So where do you get seeds? Well, right now it's a little problematic because some seed sellers are not supplying seeds due to the COVID situation, that seeds have become difficult to find, but you can still get them from local dealers. I'm seeing them crop up now in all the nursery centers. The seed catalogs are mostly providing seeds, although they may be a little bit slow. The Black Mountain Seed Library has seeds, lots of seeds. Or you can collect your own or trade with your friends. So there are sources. The one caution on seeds is that fresh seed generally germinates better than old seeds. So if you've had your seed a year or two and you're not sure, do a germination test. Put it on a paper towel and see what actually comes up. Or plant too much. If you normally planted 6, plant 12, but that will compensate for some that aren't going to germinate. So use whatever source you need, but recognize that when you make your seed choices, not all vegetables are so easy to transplant. If you're new to this game, you might want to pay attention to this. Beets, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, tomatoes are easy to transplant. They always take in the field and there's not a problem. Peppers, onions, eggplants, cauliflower, little bit harder. And then carrots, muskmelon, squash, beans, they can be a little bit of a bugger. There are gardeners who transplant every one of those plants on the chart quite successfully. It takes a little bit of experience, and you have to recognize that you need to move as much media over with it so as not to disturb the roots. If you're using something like the peat pellets or the soil blocks, where you can just pick them up and move them, they're great for the more difficult to transplant ones. You can do them all. It's a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of an art, and it's something you may get used to. So if you're not used to this, if this is new to you, if this is your first time growing your own transplants, you might want to stay with those that are just a little bit easier to do. That's part one. Let's take a break here. Melissa, do we have any specific questions on pots or media?
The only question that we have so far, Andrea asks, so the pellets don't have the problem of the peat pots?
Good question, Andrea. The pellets are totally under the soil. And the peat pots have two problems. First, if the top of the peat pot, if the rim of the peat pot sticks up, that can act like a wick. So at a minimum, you want to break that rim off so when you plant the plant, you cannot see any peat. If you're using the pellets, they're already level with the soil surface. So when you plant them in there, you won't see anything to wick it up. But the other problem with the peat pots is that peat can actually be fairly hard. And roots are picky. Roots don't like to penetrate new media. So to ask the root to grow from the potting media into and through the peat pot, and then through the peat pot into your garden soil is asking the root to do a lot. And some roots just say, not going there. Where the jiffy pellets, the peat pellets, don't have that hard shell on the outside. So they're growing in the media. The root tips may die, but the inside is really bushy and fibrous. And then as soon as that gets in the soil and it's surrounded by the dark, wet garden soil, they take off and they're not having to penetrate a layer. They're just moving from one media right into another with nothing hard in between. So other than the fact that they're both peat, they're quite different physical arrangements. I think the pellets are quite a bit easier to use and quite a bit safer for a good transplant.
We have other questions, John. Where can you find sunshine soil?
The sunshine mix is available many places. The ones that Lyndall got, I believe she picked up at Jesse Israel down by the Ag Center. I have seen it in fifth season gardening, and I think that most of the nurseries probably handle the sunshine mix. It's a professional mix. It comes in several different grades. Propagation mix is the label you want, and probably it will be propagation mix number 3 or number 4. And usually it's in big black bales. You might want to go online and look at sunshine mix because they have different ways of labeling it, and it's not perfectly clear which one is preferable, but propagation mix is a good choice.
We do have a couple of potting questions for you. Janet asks, is there one pot type that you find more successful than others?
Well, for growing transplants, I usually start in the 6-pack cell, the ones that are 36 cells in the 10-20 tray, but they're individual 6-packs. It's something that's small, like basil. I will go directly from those into the garden. If it's something like tomatoes or peppers, I will go from those into a 4-inch square pot. Tomatoes somehow like 4-inch square pots. Let them get a little bit bigger in the 4-inch square pot and then go from there directly into the garden.
We have some more, John. Betsy asks, sometimes with the Jiffy pot, the roots do not cut through for her.
I wonder, is that while they're in your tray, while you're getting ready to go, or do they get stuck in there? Do they not come out at all? So I can understand you're not seeing very many roots when you're in the tray because that's that process. They're supposed to come to the edge of the pot and die and then take off once you put it in the soil. But if they're not leaving the pot at all, if they're sticking in the pot when it's planted in the soil, that's a new one on me, and I haven't had that problem myself. I don't know what to say. I wonder if maybe the Jiffy pot in the soil is staying too dry. That's all I can guess.
Jean is asking about the sterilization of recycled containers.
Well, Gina, the official line that you read is sterilize your recycled containers, wash them, give them a brief soak in bleach that's diluted 1 to 10. So 1 cup of bleach in 9 cups of water, a 1 to 10 dilution on the bleach, give them a soak for 5 minutes, and then rinse them really thoroughly. I confess that I have never in my entire life sterilized a recycled container, and I use mine year after year. Many people do. I just never have, and it has never caused me any trouble.
Do you have any experience with cow pots made with manure?
You know, I have seen the cow pots, and they're a fascinating idea. I know it was some dairy farmers up in New England said, wow, we have cow manure, and surely somebody will pay us for cow manure. I think the idea is fascinating. I'm a little concerned that it might have the same problem as the peat pots where the roots may not want to penetrate it, although I suspect the cow manure might be a little bit softer. I haven't tried them, and I'd kind of like to, or you could try them and let us know, because they're a neat idea.
One more question. Will newspaper pots need to be peeled?
I have grown with them and I did not peel them. They're probably 3 layers of newspaper thick, so it's relatively thin. And in my experience, the roots can penetrate them okay. So what I would say is if you look at it when you're ready to transplant it out, if there are roots that have already penetrated it, if they've already come through it, then leave them alone. It certainly won't hurt to peel it, or even just grab the top and peel some strips off it. It's easy to peel, it's really soft. So I can't give you a have to. I have done it without peeling, but it certainly would be easy to peel it.
And one last question, John. What mix is good to use with the soil block technique?
Your best bet there is to go online and see what people recommend. You can buy some mixes that are specifically for that. Johnny's Selected Seed, for instance, sells the soil block apparatus, and everybody who sells those sells them at about the same price. They sell a mix that they specifically recommend for making soil blocks. You can find a lot of recipes online if you go and just look at people's soil block videos. The one that I'm going to use when I make my blocks here in a few days is made up of 1 volume, 1 container of coconut coir, and you could use peat moss instead, but by volume, 1 container of coir or peat moss, 1 equal size container of compost, and a half a container of vermiculite. I'm not using perlite. Vermiculite tends to be spongier and it tends to stick together better. So 1 container of peat or coconut coir, 1 container of compost, a half a container of vermiculite. I screen it because you want to be very, very fine. So I have a 1/4 inch mesh garden sieve. I screen it all to get any chunks out of the compost because sometimes you get some pieces of stick in there and those will break your blocks up and not let them form right. And then you have to get the moisture just right, so it's just the right consistency. And if you have it all right, you should be able to take a block, make it, and throw it at your hand. And it should hit your hand and sit there and wobble like a little blob of jello, but not fall apart. So I'd suggest go online. There's quite a few good YouTube videos. Everybody has their own favorite recipe.
One final question came through, John. How much condensation inside the plastic cover is optimum?
When I plant my plants, my soil that I'm planting into is basically saturated. I'll either pre-wet it or I'll soak it up from the bottom. So the potting media itself is saturated and then it just drains out to what's left behind. And I put the plastic cover on, depending on how much heat I have on the bottom, it's going to get condensation in there. I would say you have to see condensation. If you don't see condensation, then your media is probably not wet enough. But you can get a lot. You can get so much that it looks like it's just been soaked in there. And it's usually not a problem. You can take the cover off and give it a little bit of shake and put it back on. Don't worry about having too much because once the seedlings start to come up, you're taking the cover off anyhow. So you're not going to drown them. So let it have plenty. It's okay. Hey, those are good questions. That concludes part 1. In part 2, I'll talk about lights and temperature. Thanks for tuning in.